Adrian Knight, one of the richest men in the city, lived in a mansion filled with luxury, but his heart was empty. He had wealth, power, and respect, yet no one around him truly cared for the men behind the fortune. Hidden in the shadows of his grand home worked a young servant, Elena, who had been serving quietly for years. She was humble, hardworking, and unlike others, she never tried to impress him for money. Adrian noticed her often how she treated the elderly gardener with kindness, how she shared her meal with the security guard, and how she never complained about her long hours. For years, she remained invisible in the eyes of society. Yet in Adrian's heart, she was the brightest presence. One rainy night, Adrian overheard a phone call Elena made to her younger brother. She was encouraging him to keep studying even though they had no money. Adrian, touched by her strength and sacrifice, began to see her differently. He started asking about her life, offering small gestures of kindness. But Elena, loyal to her duty, kept her distance. What she didn't know was that Adrian had already made a silent decision. He would change her life forever. One morning, the mansion staff gathered nervously when Adrian announced he had an important message. Everyone expected it to be about business or travel, but his words left them speechless. "I want to marry Elena." Gasps filled the hall. A billionaire marrying his servant? Impossible! The other staff whispered in shock, and even Elena thought it was a cruel joke. Her hands trembled as she shook her head. "Sir, I'm just your servant." "This can't be right," she whispered, but Adrian's eyes were steady. "You're not just anything, Elena. You're the most genuine person I've ever met. I don't want a wife who loves my wealth. I want someone who has a heart as pure as yours." Elena tried to protest, but Adrian was firm. He wasn't asking, he was choosing her, despite what society might say. That night, Elena cried in her small room. She had always dreamed of love, but not like this, not in a world where people would call her a gold digger, not when she feared she could never fit into his world. Still, fate had already begun weaving their story. News of Adrian's engagement to his servant spread like wildfire. Newspapers called it a scandal. Society mocked him for lowering his standards. Women who once dreamed of being Mrs. Knight were furious, while businessmen whispered that Adrian had gone mad. But the cruelest attacks fell on Elena. She was called shameless, greedy, and undeserving. Everywhere she went, people looked at her with contempt. Even some of Adrian's family members refused to accept her. Elena wanted to give up. "You should marry someone from your world, Adrian. Someone they will respect." But Adrian only held her hand tighter. "I don't live for them, Elena. I live for us." The wedding was simple but elegant. Elena wore a modest dress, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. When Adrian vowed to protect her against the world, she knew his love was real. Still, deep inside, Elena couldn't shake the fear. What if she could never live up to his world? What if her past haunted their future? Married life was far from easy. Elena faced judgment at every turn. At charity events, rich women sneered at her, whispering behind jeweled fans. At dinners, business partners ignored her, treating her like a mistake Adrian would soon regret. Elena tried to learn, to fit in, but her insecurities grew heavier each day. One night, after a humiliating party where a guest openly mocked her, she broke down. "Adrian, I don't belong here. I'll only drag you down." She sobbed. Adrian cupped her face, his voice firm. "Listen to me, Elena. You don't have to change for anyone. They see money, but I see the woman who gave her last coin to feed a child. They see status, but I see kindness, loyalty, and strength. That is worth more than all the diamonds in the world." Slowly, Adrian began teaching her not to become someone else, but to believe in herself. Elena started speaking confidently at small gatherings, surprising everyone with her wisdom and honesty. Bit by bit, the world began to see what Adrian had seen all along. Months later, Elena hosted her first charity gala. This time, she wasn't the timid servant people mocked. She stood tall, speaking with grace and compassion about helping orphans and the poor. The very women who once sneered now applauded her, realizing she was more than worthy of her title. Adrian watched her with pride. He had always believed in her, But now the world was forced to see her strength. Elena had gone from cleaning floors in his mansion to being the lady of the house, from being invisible to being admired. But in her heart, she never forgot her roots. She still visited the servants' quarters, still spoke kindly to everyone, still gave more than she received. When a journalist asked Adrian why he married his servant, he smiled and said, "Because she is richer than me in love, in kindness, and in soul." And in that moment, Elena finally understood. She wasn't just a billionaire's wife. She was his partner, his equal, and the woman who turned his lonely empire into a home filled with love.